Just give everybody one more minute. All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Village of Lytton community meeting. My name is Lisa Staroshenko, and I'll be moderating the community meeting today. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm calling in from the traditional and unceded territories of the Lillooet people. I'm now going to pass it over to Mayor O'Connor for welcome remarks.
Thank you, Lisa. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's community meeting. Most of us are gathering via the internet from lands near and far, but I'm here in the Parish Hall in the Village of Lytton, which is located in the heart of the Entlecatham territory, where we live and work toward rebuilding our village with so many of you who yearn to return home to. Sitting here with me this evening is our entire village council, as well as other guests. Community meetings have been held almost every month since we were elected, but just over a year ago. And when we were elected, we changed the format of those meetings to better respond to our residents. For tonight's meeting, we've adjusted it again. Tonight's meeting has one main theme, which is rebuilding Lytton. And so the agenda tonight is specifically designed to include items that directly support those who are rebuilding or seriously thinking about rebuilding. I'm hoping that everyone here tonight has been following the Village of Lytton newsletters and updates. If you are, I think you're aware that we seem to have turned a corner in the past few months, and many things are progressing at a greater speed than we've seen in the last 2.5 years. And for that, I want to acknowledge our staff, all of our staff at the village who have given 100%, working with all of the partners as well as property owners and residents to get us to where we are and are continuing to move us forward. I'll just wait for, we have somebody coming in. There we go.
I would start at 6:30.
Yeah, we've already started.
You didn't wait for me.
Good. Before I turn it over to CEO Staroshenko again, who will be monitoring the Zoom tonight, I want to share 2 pieces of information. One is from Interior Health. Interior Health shared an update that they plan to seek community input into the permanent Lytton healthcare facility starting in March of this year and progressing through spring, including engagement with the village leadership. They encourage everyone to register online at engageih.ca/Lytton to receive updates and share feedback. And this morning, I received an email from Pacifican that a news release has gone out officially launching the Lytton Business Restart Program and announced that the application period is now open through to March 2025. So welcome again, everyone, and I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa. You're muted, Lisa.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen here. So hopefully everyone can see that. I'm just going to run through what we're going to be looking at this evening. So just a quick glance at our agenda. So we've had our welcoming remarks. We'll start with after this, I'll go through some Zoom instructions, just allowing everyone to know how to run Zoom if you're on your phone or on your computers. And then we're going to have a presentation from Natural Resources Canada and RDH Building Science. And then Village of Lytton will have various staff members presenting as well, and questions and answers at the end, and then closing remarks. And so just a moment, and we're going to run through some housekeeping. So for Zoom, for those of you who don't really know how to run Zoom very well, like many of us, first of all, we're going to take questions at the end for our first presenters, and then we'll also have question and answers at the end. So again, please focus your questions today on topics that are applicable to the community as a whole. And just a quick moment here as I refresh. So just with the Zoom instructions, you'll see here, there is a chat. And that's how if you'd like to answer ask any questions this evening, you can just put them into the chat box at the right-hand end of the screen. And at the end of the meeting, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask more questions out loud. So you can also use the raise hand function. And the raise hand function is under reactions at the bottom of your screen. And then you can click raise hand. If you're joining us by landline or telephone or by your cell phone, you can do *6, which will toggle mute or unmute you, and *9 will raise your hand. And then we just have, you can see here, you have the chat at the bottom, as well as the reactions. And now back to you, O'Connor.
Thank you. So as Lisa mentioned, the first item, or item number 2, I guess, after opening remarks, is a presentation by Natural Resources Canada and RDH Building Science. And so I'm going to invite, I believe it's Lucas Pauletta to begin. So welcome, Lucas. I believe you are calling in from Ontario. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor. I'm calling in from Ottawa, actually. So good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here and walk everyone through a short presentation. Myself and one of my colleagues, Robin Urquhart from RDH, and I have been working together on. What we want to spend a little bit of time on today is just revisiting the topic of net zero and wildfire-resistant housing. Just bringing back what the importance of energy efficiency is in housing. And as we look toward building better homes, more comfortable, more healthy homes, what are the benefits that come along with a net zero labeled home? And then I'll hand it over to my colleague, Robin, who will talk a little bit about what wildfire resistance is and how we can apply measures to the construction of our homes to enable them to be more wildfire resistant. So energy efficiency ingredients, what you're seeing on the screen here is 2 houses side by side. We know that there's different components of the home that affect how much energy it uses. One of the main ones we're often familiar with is insulation. So we know in the attic of a home, we have insulation there to prevent heat from rising up through our ceiling and out into the outdoors. There's different levels of insulation. So on the left, you're seeing attic R50 to attic to R80. And on the right, you're seeing R40 to R60. And so what this is describing is the thickness or the amount of insulation we have in our attic and how thickness translates to more energy saved. So the thicker it is, the more energy saved. There's also a number of other components of the home that affect the energy efficiency of it. So there's the air tightness of it, so how leaky your home is. The windows, so whether you have a single pane, a double pane, or a triple pane window, has a big impact on the comfort and the performance of the house. Walls, another place where we put insulation to keep ourselves warm or cool during different times of the year. Our heating system, there's a number of different types of heating systems that exist. There's heat pumps, which use electricity at a very high level of efficiency to convert the energy that's out in the air, whether that be cold or hot air, into the desired temperature that you want it inside. So a heat pump's able to operate almost in 2 ways. It can function as both an air conditioner and as a heating source. There's the foundation as well, and that has insulative properties. And then there's the slab that sits underneath the house that also prevents cold or warm air from passing through to the ground. Now, when we put all of these ingredients together, the attic, the air tightness, the windows, et cetera, what we get is a recipe. And so on the left-hand side of the screen, we're seeing a net zero recipe. And on the right-hand side is a code recipe. And so in BC, where you folks are in Lytton, BC, I believe code is BC step code 3. And so there's a recipe that comes with building to step 3 to meet those requirements. And there's a recipe that comes with getting you to a net zero level of requirements. And on the net zero side, it's slightly higher performance for your windows and walls and insulation, things like that. And there's also the inclusion of solar panels on the roof. And the idea behind solar panels is that they're able to generate electricity from the sun, and you're able to use that as needed. and it's free because it's coming from the sun. So energy efficiency in housing has been improving in Canada. We've come a long way in terms of how we deal with the climate, how we deal with the energy efficiency of homes, and how we deal with the comfort and the performance of them. So homes built before the 1990s, typically they didn't have very good energy efficiency, and that led to really high utility costs. I live in an older home, and I was on propane furnace, and I was spending upwards of $400 or $500 a month to heat the house. So that's a big barrier for us and makes a good business case for energy efficiency. These older homes also had minimal insulation, and oftentimes the rooms themselves were uncomfortable. If you've ever lived in a house with a single pane window in the wintertime, you probably don't want to go anywhere near that window because it's just going to suck the heat right out of you. So that's what was happening with the older homes. So BC Step Code 3 homes, they have really good energy efficiency. It's significantly improved over homes from the past. They typically use about 50% less energy than one of those older 1990 homes. There's a high quality of construction that goes along with it. And there's also an improved level of comfort. So as you walk through the house from room to room, you don't notice a fluctuation of temperature. And you're also able to stand next to those walls or to those windows when it's really cold outside. Now, net zero takes energy efficiency and comfort and health one step further. It almost uses zero energy from the grid. And that's a benefit to you as a homeowner because that means you're not going to be paying very much for energy on a monthly basis. You're going to be relying on what's coming from the sun. And from a net zero home's perspective, the amount of energy it requires as a baseline is significantly lower than a step 3 home. So there's a really good financial incentive to build to net zero for today. And as we look toward the future where we can expect energy and electricity prices to go up, you're protecting yourself from rising prices by almost putting a power plant on your roof with solar panels. They also have excellent health and comfort associated with these homes. And just for everyone's reference, like from Natural Resources Canada and from the federal government's perspective, we're trying to encourage folks across Canada to build to net zero. We believe that it's a very important standard to achieve, to aim toward. And we're seeing the benefits and hearing the benefits from folks who are living in net zero homes right now, that the comfort, the quality, the improvement on energy is second to none. So just comparing net zero versus the current building code, both net zero and step 3, which is what the minimum that you would have to build to in Lytton and all over BC for that matter, they both require the use of an energy advisor. And so an energy advisor is someone who works with your builder, and together they figure out what the right recipe is to allow you to get to step 3 or to net zero. How much insulation do we put in? Do we need a double or a triple pane window? Together they answer questions like that. Also something to note is that it takes about the same amount of time to design and construct a net zero or a step 3 home. So it doesn't take longer. It's not a barrier for builders to design and construct these homes. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or is hearing anything otherwise, we're happy to work with you and address maybe some concerns that we're hearing around net zero and the feasibility of it in Lytton. We've done a lot of work in the background just to understand where we can do net zero across Canada, and we've most definitely found a number of ways to do it in Lytton. So we'll be happy to talk about that further if there are any questions around can we do net zero in Lytton. But we know that if and when we do these net zero homes, they're almost always built with more durable and energy efficient materials. Your cost of electricity goes way down because it's being generated by solar. And then we know there's a significant improvement on the comfort and the health of the home. And it's just going to improve. It's going to last. The home is built to last, 50 years, 75 years. And the energy efficiency, the comfort, the health remain with that home over time, and they're enduring. My last slide here, just kind of bringing it back to some of the ingredients that we talked about earlier. There's some really key ones that are typically come with a net zero house. One of them is exterior insulation. So there's insulation that sits outside of the framing of the house. And so Robin's going to touch on this a little bit too, but it's both a component to net zero homes as well as a wildfire resistant measure as well when you're using a particular type of insulation. And it's called mineral wool board, but Robin will talk about that in a bit. The other one is cold climate heat pumps. So these are heat pumps that are able to extract heat out of the air when it's really cold outside and convert that into a hot air to heat your house. They're designed to operate in really low temperatures. We've seen them down to -25, -30, still be able to output heat and satisfy the requirements of the house. Triple pane windows are also another big one. They're really good for comfort and for sound. I mean, if it's really noisy outside, triple pane windows often are really good at minimizing the noise that passes through them compared to double or single panes. You also probably won't see that condensation build up on it, and it'll be nice and cozy when you get up next to it in the wintertime. And then the last one around net zero is solar panels. And I've talked about that quite a bit already, but they sit on the roof of your house and they're just a passive power plant. So as long as the sun is shining, these solar panels are converting that sun's energy into electricity, and that becomes made available for you to use as you need it. I think that's it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Robin. If anyone has any questions on anything I've spoken about, I think there'll be a couple minutes after Robin's presentation for us to talk about that. I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Oh. Yeah, thank you, Lucas. So Robin will be up here in a minute.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. Thanks, Lisa. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks to everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm going to be talking about, as Lucas mentioned, wildfire-resistant construction. I'm going to talk about sort of the highest level of wildfire-resistant construction, and also just what you can do generally. My hope from this presentation is people just understand it a bit better, decide if it's what they want to do with their home, and then if they do decide they want to do it, then how would you go about doing it? It's basically, I'd like to just demystify it a tiny bit. So by way of background, my name is Robin Urquhart. I live in a small town in BC. It's called Atlin. Some of you might know it. It's similar to Lytton in a lot of ways. It's also an area that is subject to wildfires. I started out as a carpenter. Now I work for RDH as a senior project consultant. And recently we moved in. I'm in it right now in 2023. We designed and built, my wife and I, the northernmost net zero and wildfire resilient home. So I'm sort of like, speaking from some experience personally in this and why I would make these decisions. So without further ado, what is wildfire resistant construction? There's a lot that goes into it. I'm talking mostly about the structure of the building, but by far, for sure, the first thing that you want to do is landscaping. So it's at the home ignition zone. It's these areas. You've heard about it from FireSmart. I think everybody's probably been beaten over the head with all this stuff since 2021. So it's not, I'm sure none of it's new. The big thing to understand about wildfire resistant construction is we're not building fireproof homes. It's really hard to build a fireproof home. It's basically got to be a steel Quonset hut. So that's not what we're doing. We're trying to reduce the risk of structural ignition, and we do that in a variety of ways. The reason we do that is it slows spread of fire in a community, reduces fuel availability, so the fire doesn't get as hot, and it allows people to respond to a fire, to shelter in place, to get out of a fire, and it can reduce the impact on the buildings themselves, the community. But it really has to be used in tandem with landscaping, fuel management, and a structured fire response. That's like, fire department, water bomber, stuff like that. So I'm just talking about one small part of it, just the structure part. I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor, but that's all I'm really talking about today. But all this other stuff is really important too. This is Atlin. This is where I live. On the left-hand side is the fire rating. These are maps that were developed in 2021 for BC, the risk hazard maps for wildfire. You can see the area I'm in, the little green arrow. It's a high wildfire risk zone. So when we were designing our house, I was like, okay, well, maybe we should try and address that risk somewhat. This is Lytton. This was in 2021. It looks a little bit different now, but it's going to look like this pretty soon again. And we all know it. It's 98% of the Lytton area is in the extreme to extreme wildfire risk area. So why do we build wildfire resistant homes? It's to, mitigate high exposure areas, high risk areas. But we only do it if it's going to do something, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to build a home if it's not going to have any chance at standing up to a wildfire. So we know that embers cause about up to 90% of structural ignitions. It's like sparks and blowing embers, blowing ahead of the fire. It's so much less this wall of heat. It can be a big wall of heat, but that's about 10% of buildings that catch fire. It's really these sparks that come in advance. And we know that we can reduce the risk of fires caused by sparks and embers. And one good example was in 2018, the Camp Fire. It burned through a couple of towns in California. One was called Paradise. You might have heard of it. It was the deadliest wildfire in U.S. history before Lahaina in Maui. And 51% of the homes built after 2008 survived. 18% of the homes built before 2008 survived. So what happened in 2008? That's when California introduced legislation for wildfire resistant construction. That's it. And so we know it makes a big difference. And then the forensic report, lessons learned from what happened in Lytton, one of the big findings from that report was, and I've written it at the bottom there, for individual structures and collectively community ignition resistance is the most effective approach for reducing community wildfire risk and preventing wildland urban fire disasters. So we know that we can do something about it. That's not really in question. So how do we do it? There's lots of guidance out there. Some of it is better than others. A lot of it is very confusing. So we developed the checklist with PacificCan to try and make this a little bit easier. It's based on the National Research Council's Guide to Wildland and Urban Interfaces. FireSmart has really good guidance too. They're more on the landscaping side, but they do talk about structures as well. But for sure, FireSmart's the best place to go for most of your wildfire information. In terms of mitigation measures, landscaping is the most important by far. If fire can't get to your house, it's not going to catch your house on fire. But you can't always control that. And even, when a fire is throwing sparks 2 miles ahead of itself, you want to be able to have some resistance to that. And so the way we do that primarily, and it's not really that difficult, it's choosing the right roof material. Asphalt shingles are a good roof material. Tin, no gaps in your enclosure that are greater than 3 millimeters, or they should be sealed or screened. Fire resistant windows, doors, non-combustible materials on the exterior. And in some cases, we'd recommend a wildfire rated wall assembly. That's a bit more technical, but we do have guidance for that too. And then screened in vents. Most of this stuff is stuff we're already doing in conventional construction anyway. So it's not really like a huge jump to learn these things, but there is some complexity in it that builders don't always feel comfortable with. And so what we've done is we've developed these technical information sheets within our CAN that's based on feedback from builders who were operating in Lytton, Kamloops area to try and figure out, like, okay, if you do want to go ahead and build a fire-resistant home, wildfire-resistant home, what do all the details actually look like? How do you actually put it together? And there was some confusion about it, so we developed these guides, which we will be providing as support material. Not just even for PacificCan. I'm hoping it's going to go a lot further. We're working with a lot of partners on this, and it's really good material, and I think will influence the industry. And then there's funding available. PacificCan was providing funding. I'm not exactly sure what's happening in the PacificCan program now, but it provided funding for wildfire resistant construction. When I built my house and built it wild, I didn't get any money for that. It was just my own insurance policy for myself. I would have loved a little bit of like cost sharing. But it's not that much more expensive, honestly. It's about 10 to 15% of the total build cost. And when we did the costing estimate for Lytton, which was canvassing a select number of builders and getting them to cost out the average home, it worked out to about $26,000. So, there is some cost addition in building a wildfire resistant home, but that cost can often be shared by net zero. Because you're making, like Luke was saying, if you're putting exterior insulation on, you're making the same choice, basically. And you'd be surprised, like some of the materials that you're choosing. If you choose hardy board, fiber cement, you have a non-combustible exterior anyway. So in a lot of cases, that 26,000 drops to 15 or 10 or 0, depending on some of the choices that you were going to make for your house anyway. So I think that's it in a nutshell. These are actually pictures from Fort McMurray. Fort McMurray had the same lessons learned as Lytton. There is something we can do about it. It's not rocket science. The best way that we can reduce wildland urban interface disasters is to reduce structure ignition. We can't, if the buildings don't catch fire, we don't have as much of a problem. Wildfire resistant construction is effective at reducing structure ignition risk, and there are resources available to help people do this, both technical and in financial, which helps defray the additional cost. And then just also, because I think this is common in out there, like we're not building fireproof homes. Some of these homes, like that statistic from California, 51% of the homes survived. That means 49% didn't, right? What we're trying to do is reduce the risk, slow the spread. Maybe not everybody's as affected, but we're not, it doesn't mean that your home is 100% safe if you build a wildfire resistant home. So anyway, welcome questions. Appreciate the time to chat with you about it today. Yeah, so thanks.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you, Lucas. I don't know, well, maybe some people felt like they've been beaten over the head with this information, but it's been quite a while since we've had any presentation. And so, you know, lots of what you have said will be things that people have heard before, as you mentioned, and for some people, it will be new. But I do appreciate your common sense, practical approach, and simplified presentation. Now, we will open it up for questions for Lucas and Robin. I'm wondering, Lisa, if there's anybody online that wishes to raise their hand to ask a question, or if anything's been written in the chat.
Nothing is in the chat as of yet. And if anyone would like to ask a question, they can do the raise hand. Again, that's the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. And I'm not seeing.
Is there anyone in the hall here? Maybe when people ask the question, they say their name and maybe where they're from. Yes.
Councillor Lightfoot from the Village of Lytton. I'm just wondering, Lucas, you suggested that Robin perhaps would give us more information about the exterior insulation, some wood fiber or wool fiber. I'm not sure if I wasn't paying attention, but I don't recall hearing it. I'm wondering if Robin could expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you were paying attention. I didn't go into depth in it. So we've developed these wall assemblies with a fire protection engineering firm. And if you use the way it's looking right now, we have to finalize these assemblies, but it looks like using mineral fiber insulation. We know using mineral fiber insulation as an exterior insulation provides some fire protection to the exterior of the building. And it may even provide the sort of like magical 1 hour wildfire resistance rating. So the insulation is mineral fiber. It could be rock wool, or Owens Corning makes a rain barrier, but 2 inches of that provides a fair amount of fire resistance to the overall wall assembly.
Can I follow up? So is that just framed on the, say, could you apply it to an existing house? So
Yep.
You would just frame it on the outside and then do your sheathing on top of that?
Yep, well, basically it goes on. So you have your stud wall assembly and your sheathing, then your weather resistant barrier, and then you have your exterior insulation, and that usually gets attached with strapping. So like 1x4 or something like that, that's screwed, and it screws through the insulation, and it traps the insulation, and that forms a truss, so it's structurally fine. And that's how you usually attach exterior mineral wool. And then your cladding goes on the outside. The strapping cavity also creates your rain screen barrier, and then your cladding goes on outside the strapping.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from inside? Yeah.
Bernie Wagner from Lytton. Robin, I'm all for making it more fire resistant.
Speak up a bit.
Oh, I'm all for making Lytton more fire resistant. But first of all, NRC isn't approved in Canada. And the other thing is zones don't work in a town where houses are 10 feet apart, because your zone 2 goes right into the yard and the house. So I think there has to be a different approach to this, because it's not reasonable.
Yeah.
And
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bernie.
Oh, go ahead if you want to answer that.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. The zone approach, the way that fire smarting works, means that, yeah, the zones bleed into each other, and you can't always control what your neighbor does. So that's where the resistant construction plays a bigger role because you can protect your house a little bit more, and maybe you are the bulwark. So maybe someone else's house catches fire and yours doesn't. It doesn't spread to the next house. That's one idea. As for the NRC is the National Research Council of Canada, and they produce the building codes that we use, like the National Building Code of Canada. And they've produced a guide, which is the Guide to Wildland and Urban Interfaces, where they specify construction recommendations. So they're not requirements, they're recommendations for wildfire resistant construction. And in going through that guide, I think, Bernie, this might be also what you're thinking. There were some issues we found with that guide that we've fixed for the Pacifican program rollout in Lytton.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Now,
yes,
do you have another, sorry, one more
well,
question.
this one
Yeah.
would be for Lucas.
Okay.
Now, Lucas, I've done the research, and you don't get heat out of the air when it's 30 below. So what you do is you get heat when you compress the air. And it is still more efficient than, say, natural gas. Well, natural gas is just a little bit more efficient than heat pumps right now, money-wise. But the thing is with Lytton, a lot of people didn't have insurance. And even the ones with insurance, they don't pay for a heat pump, which I checked it out. It's about, for Lytton, be about 24,000. And because we don't have a backup heat system, they sell them with the backup propane system. So in Lytton, you don't want just a heat pump, you want a backup. So money-wise, the government isn't providing Lytton for backup heat. There's no grant for people that build a new house, only for those that are changing over from oil or propane to a heat pump. So a couple of problems here.
Yeah, thanks for those questions, Bernie. I think, so just to clarify on the Pacifican grant, so there's one component of it, which is the wildfire resistance, which Robin has spoken a little bit about. And then the other component of it is achieving a net zero level of performance for your house. And the way we designed the net zero portion of the grant was we worked with local builders and we did a number of energy models, and we talked to builders who have constructed net zero homes in remote and cold communities. So we brought everyone together and we talked through, well, what would be the cost and what are the technologies necessary to achieve net zero in Lytton? And heat pumps are one of them. It's called a cold climate air source heat pump. So you're right, they're not all created equal. Some of them only function to like -10 or so. And then there's other ones that can go down to like -25. -30 is a stretch, you're right. You're not always getting heat. So you do need a backup source. And oftentimes, and this is the way we costed it out, was we costed a backup system with our cold climate air source heat pump. That's actually part of the Natural Resource Canada's modeling guidelines. So anytime an energy advisor or any home is built or modeled to have a heat pump in it as the primary heating device, we always model a backup system in there as well. And so, yeah, we have a number of options for backup heat. One that's most common, especially when you have solar panels on your roof or you're going all electric, is to have like backup heating resistant strips. So they sit within your air handler or within your furnace. And when it's -30 out and your heat pump isn't generating enough heat, they're almost like electric baseboards. They kick in and they add a little extra boost of heat to keep the house warm. There are other backup options as well. You could go propane furnace. I think that would probably be a more expensive solution because, well, if you were to go to net zero as well, because then you need a heat pump, which is like doing heating and cooling. You'd have two primary heating devices almost. And we know the cost of propane is pretty high. And the other option that I've heard is like having a wood stove in the house as well. That's a good backup heat source, although it's not necessarily passive. It requires you to be there and be involved, and you got to stoke the fire and whatnot. So yeah, I think the Pacifican grant that allows you to get to net zero, it is for new builds. I agree. it does cover the cost of a cold climate air source heat pump, and it does cover the cost of a backup system sufficient to get you all the heat you need through the coldest of days in the winter.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Lisa, is there any other questions with hands raised there?
I don't see anyone with hands raised. No.
Okay.
I have two.
Thank you. You're right beside me and I
I know,
can't
I could
see
see.
you. Sorry. There we go.
I had a couple questions. They're just very simple questions. First one is about reaching net zero when you have obstructions like hills in the way. So how can you ever get a net zero house if the hillside is right behind you and it's going to block your solar panels from actually being particularly efficient? You just have no hope and it's never going to happen for you, and you just, too bad, so sad, live your life that way, or what?
It's a good question. It's definitely a reality of trying to get energy from the sun, right? If there's things blocking, if there's things in the way between the sun and our panels, we're not getting much energy. What I will say, definitely site makes a big difference. Where your house is located, what direction it's going to be facing, if there's trees, if there's hills, and that definitely makes it more challenging to reach net zero. The criteria to meet net zero is you have to generate as much energy as your home requires throughout the year. So you have to be able to offset how much you generate from the sun versus how much you actually use. And what we find is, as we get to houses that are more restricted in the amount of solar energy that they can generate, typically we compensate for that by bringing the amount of energy the house needs down as much as we can. So maybe that means adding a little bit more insulation, having a little slightly more energy efficient heat pump. There's your energy advisor and your builder can work together to find a solution to get to net zero. If you find yourself in a place where you just can't generate a lot of solar, then an option exists is maybe you spend less money, less of your grant on solar panels, and maybe we put more of that grant into your insulation or your air tightness or your windows, therefore requiring you to, your house needs less energy, and so you don't have to have as much solar on the roof. So it's a really good point. There's definitely complexities. It's not just yes, we put solar, we're guaranteed to get to net zero. We do have to think of what's around us, but we've seen people get to net zero in some very, very, very tricky conditions. So I do believe it can be done.
I had my second question. My second question is about windows, and I've been hearing about these fire-resistant windows for the last 2 years, and it's a complete mystery to me. What is a fire-resistant window?
Yep, I think that's to many, many people as well, and that was one of the issues that we had with the NRC guide, and so we developed a different window specification. So I can tell you what the Pacific Hands version of a fire-resistant window is, or as wildfire resistant as we think is feasible. It's multi-pane, so you have more than one pane in it, like a double pane or a triple pane window, and one of the panes has to be tempered glass, and so that's heat treated, and it's 4 times more heat resistant than normal glass, and it adds a little bit of cost to the window, but actually not nearly as much as you'd think. When we had builders in Lytton cost it out, it put the window package from $10,000 to $11,000 or $12,000, the tempered pane for all of the windows. So it's definitely a cost increase, but less than we actually thought it would be. And then the frame of the window can be almost anything except exposed wood. And that's also in the checklist. It makes it a bit more specific, but fiberglass with a fire retardant resin, aluminum, thermally broken aluminum frame, wood frame with an aluminum or metal cladding on it. So it's a great question, because it was one of the biggest hurdles that we had to overcome with this, and it was screwing everybody up. But we went to California's standard, and we looked at a whole bunch of other stuff, and we think we have a pretty good specification for a wildfire window now.
How available are those windows with tempered glass?
You can get them made. Almost any window manufacturer will put a tempered pane in if you ask them.
Thank you. Now, I don't, Ernie has one more question.
Yeah. Lucas, unless I missed it, there's still the problem of getting a grant for building a new house. Has that changed?
Is the question like, do you want to get a grant for a new house? Is that what you're like?
Well,
That's
most
a
of the
bit
ones here are building new houses. And
Right.
not too long ago, I checked into it. The grant wasn't available unless the house was 6 months old. So has that changed?
So I think there's one grant that's available right now from the federal government, and that's called the Greener Homes Grant. That's available to all Canadians across Canada, and it's $5,000 toward retrofitting or renovating your existing home.
Yeah, but
That
not a new.
Not
Not
a
a
new
new
one,
home.
right? No. So that's a program that's been running for, I think, 2 years now. It's actually just ramping down. I think it's going to close out at the end of March. For new housing, though, Pacifican is offering a grant, which I think probably a lot of folks in the room there will be happy to chat with you about, and so will we. But that's for new housing, and that I mean that ranges anywhere from I think $60,000 to almost $100,000, depending on the size of the home, your home that burned down in the fire. And that will be, yeah, that's a grant that you don't have to pay back. That is toward new housing and toward getting to net zero.
Yes, and that link I noticed has been put into the chat here, the information on that, on the Pacifican grant there. Okay, Councillor Lightfoot.
I just want to ask this one question because it comes up from time to time and I'm not sure I have an accurate answer. How fire resistant are solar panels to burning embers?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It depends on the panel. Generally, they're reasonably resistant, but the panel manufacturer, you'd have to look into each specific panel to figure out what their sort of combustibility rating is. So it's hard to generalize, except that they're usually have a glass or silica, outside and are pretty much metal. So they're reasonably resistant, but it is a good question, and you'd have to follow up with the panel manufacturer, but it shouldn't impact the rating of the roof, even depending on how they're installed. And the roof is that's your protection for your house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Michelle, Village of Lytton. I just wanted to clear up on Ernie's question. So I think what he's getting at is right now there's a grant available if you're retrofitting your house, so renovating. But for a new house, you're only eligible for a heat pump grant if you're building full net zero. Is that correct? There's no grant for just to go out and buy a heat pump.
That's correct. Yeah. The grant is for all of the ingredients that will take you to net zero. And part of that is a heat pump. But yeah, the criteria is you can't just pick one ingredient. You have to come up with a whole recipe to get you to net zero. And that's when you get access to the grant.
Okay, and still nothing online. No other questions?
And if I just wanted to mention one other thing. Coming up in March, so Natural Resources Canada, myself and Robin, we'll be meeting with a group of builders with some of the builders maybe from that folks in Lytton are working with, or the ones that have come out to our previous training sessions and are interested in building homes in Lytton. And our goal for that session in March is to talk through like the challenges that they may be having around net zero or fire resistance. We've heard from some builders, it's new. It's not necessarily something that they've done 100 times. And the goal of that session is really just to talk through how we can get to fire resistant housing, how we can get to net zero housing, how we can leverage some of the technical materials and knowledge that already exists out there, and just support these builders as they, as you yourselves as folks from Lytton reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like to build a net zero or a fire resistant house. Can we do it? Our goal is to have that builder be able to say, yes, absolutely. We have the resources, we've got the technical support to do it, and we're ready to help you access this program. So just wanted to put that out there to folks that we're not only working with yourselves in the village, we're also reaching out to those builders who we hope can help us advance our initiative as well and get some houses on the ground as soon as possible.
Where's that?
It's going to be was the question, where is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one's going to be a virtual session. It's March 17th. We're hosting, we're doing an hour online. with the building group. And then I think from that, we'll see if, maybe an in-person session is required, or if another follow-up session is necessary. And then, yeah, I think it'd be great if we could, find a way to connect those builders who are keen with some of the homeowners who might be interested in accessing the program, and just making some connections there.
Great, thank you so much. You had mentioned, or one of you had mentioned, that people could reach out to you. So I'm assuming we have your contact information that we can make public to people, that if they have further questions or would like to contact you. So thank you so much. And I guess it's late in Ontario, and well, I guess Atlin isn't quite as late, but we'll move on to the next part of our agenda. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.
So we have Village of Lytton presentations on the agenda here, which of course our staff have been working on a number of things, and I'm going to ask our CAO, Diane Marquette, to talk about those.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mayor O'Connor. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our community meeting. I'm going to run through a few general items, and then after I'm finished, I'm going to turn it over to Birte Declue, who runs our planning team and is in charge of all things planning. And then after Birte, we'll hear from our recovery managers, Mike Blaschuk and Don Wong, on some specific things that they're working on. So just to kind of kick it off, I mean, one of the reasons why we're talking about some of these things, some of them have been discussed before, some information might be new, but just really to encourage everybody as much as possible to kind of get started on planning your rebuild. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is to meet some of the grant program deadlines that are available, that won't be available forever. We have a fairly efficient system for building permits, but they do take time. So, kind of get that process underway and get in the queue for that. Obviously, we all know about the shortage of, contractors and trades and those kinds of things. And with recent events in communities not that far from here, the competition for contractors and trades is just going to increase over time. So, and then the final thing is that the village is going to be making some fairly significant investments into our water and sewer systems with some grant funding that we have, and we will be prioritizing some of those investments based on where some of the rebuilding is happening. So the sooner we know, kind of where that is, the better we can plan those investments. So next slide, Lisa, please. So just very, very quickly, a couple of important program deadlines to keep in mind. I mean, at this time, the Pacific Can home rebuilding program expires on March the 31st. So applications need to be in by March the 31st, 2024. Now we're working with Pacific Can, and they're working very hard to see if we can get that deadline extended. But we're waiting to hear confirmation of that. There is the Village of Lytton building fee reduction program. So that is for people that have their building permit application in by June the 30th of 2024. And then we have recently kind of announced a archaeology grant, which is also available to people who have their building permit applications in by January 30th of 2024. But it does apply to work that's done up until November the 1st. The Pacific Can programs, the homeowner program we've talked about quite a bit, and there's recently been announcements that there's a program together with the cooperators financing so that we can bridge the expenditures that homeowners need to make in order to achieve net zero and fire resiliency. So the expenditures are made through the contractor and they're financed through cooperators. So that has been announced recently, and as I said, that one expires on March 31st, but working to get it extended. As the mayor said in her opening comments, we got the business program details today. So that's been announced that that program is open now for applications. It's $7.2 million that's been announced to help restart Lytton businesses. There's kind of two primary streams to that. One is a $20,000 kind of quick start, non-repayable amount of money available to small businesses in Lytton. And then there's another stream that is sort of $1 million, up to $1 million of repayable funding that's available. Some of it may be non-repayable depending on the business, and some criteria that are set out. So there's going to be more details coming out about this. We'll actually have some information in the newsletter tomorrow about it, but very excited that now has been announced, and that program it goes to March 31st, 2025, not 2024. So that one has been extended.
Yeah.
The building permit fee reduction program. This is for all of the property owners in Lytton rebuilding where they were on June 30th, 2021, a property that they lost in the fire. It's for a complete reduction of 50% of all fees calculated under bylaw 710. We have had a couple of those reductions issued so far because we have issued some building permits. So that's great news. This program goes for all building permit applications that are received by the village by June 30th. On the archaeology grant program, it's got sort of similar criteria. It's up to $5,000 for property owners, and this goes towards eligible costs that support work under the HCA permit. So it might include qualified personnel on site, some post-field work activities, some of the reporting that needs to be done, etc. So the way that this program will work is the property owner will work with their archaeologist on the requirements for their specific property. When they receive the billing for that work, the Village of Lytton will pay the first $5,000 to the archaeologist directly, and the property owner will be responsible for the rest. This is for building permit. These are for owners that have building permit applications in by June the 30th, and again, the work can be done anytime up until November the 1st of 2024. And then just to kind of remind everybody of, kind of who to contact if you need some help. We'll be putting this, of course, in the newsletter and on the website on a bit more kind of regular basis. So just listing out, our community navigator, Jeff Eisert, our recovery managers, Mike and Dawn. But in terms of some of the specifics that you need to do in terms of permitting and planning and whatnot, the contact information for our building department, Lynn Berlin, and our planning department, which is Birgit Declue, Corey Gain, and Jack Pawsey. So they're just reached at planning@lytton.ca, and they kind of share that box. And then if you still need help or you don't know where to go, or have another question, you can always email me, and I'll do my best to either answer you or direct you to somebody that can answer you. So that's kind of our how-to on connecting with the village. So this next item, I'm just going to speak very briefly to. You can expect to see more on this in the coming days, but we've worked to put together some documents for property owners just to try to fill in some of the gaps on how some of the specific processes work. And it first started with water connections and people just kind of wondering how to get some water reconnected. And so we've created these documents. There's 3 finalized, a 4th one very close to finalized, and we will be adding more to them, but it's just around kind of how do you connect with the village. That's the document I just reviewed. There'll be a document on how to connect to our water system, how to connect to our sewer system. And then a 4th document that kind of gives some general guidance around how to minimize the impacts of your construction to the heritage resources. And so that's general guidance and has to do with things like where on your lot you might place your house and where there's already disturbed soil and some considerations like that. Our colleagues at our branch are working on much more, I would say, robust guidance for owners as it relates to archaeology and some of the more specific requirements under the Heritage Conservation Act. We weren't attempting to cover that off in this document. This is just some general guidance that has to do with your building planning as you get ready. So those will be available on the website, and there'll be copies of them down at the village office if anybody wants to pick one up. So now I'm going to turn it over to, we'll do questions at the end for Village of Lytton presentations, if that's all right with everyone. We'll keep going through. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over now to Birta, and she's going to talk a little bit about development services, planning, how that whole kind of world works, and when you may need to consider interacting with them.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Diane. I'm Birta. I'm part of the Lytton planning team, and we're based in Kelowna. As mentioned, Jack and Corey are part of my team, and we work together to try to help Lytton as best as we can. We've had the pleasure of working with the Village of Lytton since April 2023. So we've almost been in the fold for about a year. Part of our job is to help coordinate the interactions between property owners and all of these participants in the development process. We use our skills and our expertise to assist property owners with all the gears of the machine that you see on the slide. We provide services to council and the community under several legislative authorities, and I'm going to list them off quite quickly here. One is the Community Charter, the Local Government Act, the BC Building Act and BC Building Code, and the Village of Lytton bylaws, as well as all applicable federal and provincial legislations. Next slide, please. We're here to help you find a simple solution to working within development regulations, and if that's not possible, guide you through how we could possibly do some variances and other ways to work within the framework. Next slide, please. To provide a context, it's always useful to have a framework in which to organize tools. This framework describes a cascading relationship of the various components of the official community plan and the regulatory bylaws that flow from objectives and policies. Our aim is to implement legislative requirements and local government best practices in a way that serves and respects the community's needs. Let's go into some details. Next slide, please. The official community plan is an umbrella document, and I really always imagine it as a beautiful, colorful umbrella with lots of different spikes that go in because it touches so many different things. But it describes the community's vision for the future, including land use patterns, guides for development, and plans on how best the vision can be realized. The Village of Lytton's OCP was written in 1998, so it's almost 26 years old, and may no longer reflect the current vision to rebuild the community. Next slide, please. The zoning bylaw is a land use bylaw that further refines intended development patterns. It is a principal tool used to implement the OCP vision for the community by guiding permitted land use, density, siting, dimensions of structures, and size. Rezoning is a process of changing a zone on land that's not permitted under the current zoning designation. As this document is also almost 26-year old, several amendments have been made to it since we came on board in April 2023 to make it current to your needs. We are also still always looking at the document to see what else we can do to help you build. Next slide, please. Regulatory bylaws like the building bylaw provide the how things will be achieved. The following are some of the responsibilities and activities of the building department. They're providing a detailed review of building permit applications, conducting building plan reviews, issuing building bylaws, inspecting new construction and renovations on site, ensuring projects follow the zoning and land use bylaws, reviewing of business licenses for compliance with building bylaw requirements for health and safety. Next slide, please. There is a linear sequence of steps to move forward for any rebuild. It can feel daunting, especially when not used to it, but the village has a team in place to help you out. Next slide, please. Although it may seem as if little activity is occurring, there is a lot happening in the background, and we've been asked to just provide some of the projects that have actually been approved at this time. This particular slide shows you some of the planning projects that have been approved by council and where the development permit has been issued. One of them includes a new grocery store with residential units, offices, and other commercial spaces. Next slide, please. This one is a list of the building permits issued to date. So we are excited that things are moving forward, and we want to keep that momentum going and help the villagers as best as we can. I've also got the same slide, next slide please, that Diane showed. Finally, I just want to let you know that, oops, oh, that one wasn't in my slide deck. Let's just move on to the next one, please. Okay, that's not my slide either. Okay, we're going to stop there. Just wanted to let you know we're here to help. Jeff and Mike are always at the village, and they have the expertise to send you to the appropriate team member. Give us a call with any land use or building questions that you may have. Our numbers are on the website. If you go under rebuilding, there's both the building and the planning number. And I'm looking forward to any questions that you might have after this presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Berthe. Diane, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor O'Connor. So next, I think, Lisa, the next presentation is for our recovery manager, Mike Blaschuk. He's going to give us some of the highlights on what we can expect this spring for the backfilling that's remaining to be done. If you can bring that back up, please.
He's getting stuck.
Yeah.
Is it coming, Lisa?
We had an issue a couple of meetings ago. Oh, there it is.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you. So this map should look relatively familiar. This is where we completed most of the sites in zones 1 through 6 before we sort of ran into the weather. We were very fortunate to have a fairly mild fall, but you got to the point where we just had sort of got to the point where we're starting to get freeze ups. So we now need to complete the balance of the properties. We anticipate starting that mid-March. Right now, and the priority will be for sites that are preparing to rebuild. So we've got, I know, a couple of properties up at Old Island Highway. So that will be our priority to get those ones done so they're ready, and then we'll move on to other ones that need some work done. And that will largely finalize the backfill for the rest of the properties in the village. Can I get the next slide? Most of the work is minor remediation. There's a few little stragglers that have a little bit of work still to be done. And there's a bit of one foundation that's still left. So we'll have to work on that. Mostly continuous cap and fill project. And we're getting pretty good at that. We've got two main things to do with that. We've got to get the work plans before KHC and get those approved. So we can do that now. We can start getting that process now. So when we're ready to go, we're not waiting for that process. We also will do a RFP out for a fresh one for tender to do this work. I mean, we had existing ones. We're continuing to be competitive out there. So we're in the process of developing that. We anticipate having that out shortly. We'll likely doing a walk around to companies interested in doing that, show them what, so they know what the work is, we can well describe it, and we have good documents, so they'll be able to do that. And then we'll be able to sort of complete, there's geotechnical survey and contour work that we'll be able to complete once the backfill is finalized. So it's, a bit of a winter pause and back at it again. So that's where we are.
Great, thank you.
And next we'll go to our recovery manager, Don Wong. He's going to jump in and just give us a few comments about some of the infrastructure work that's going on.
Oh, hi all. This is a bit of rehash from last night's council meeting. Just a reminder, folks, that the village launched an RFP. Diane mentioned it earlier, how some of the infrastructure grants for water, sewer, and whatnot require a master plan. And it's the time for the village to update its master plan. As some folks know, there was, let's just say, some extra piping here and there around town. So the village launched an RFP to hire an engineering firm, a consulting firm, to develop a combined master plan. Proud to announce that Archimedes Consulting won it. Archimedes is led by Ward Bowman and Dan Mundell. All right, and just a reminder that, not a reminder, but this work will be the basis of the rebuild in terms of all the linear services, and we'll be prioritizing folks that are rebuilding. Next slide, please, Lisa. In terms of community infrastructure, this was announced last night as well. The village launched an RFP for an architectural owner's advisor. It came down to, we had over 10 applicants, 9 qualified applicants that submitted. We selected down the top 3, and we worked with LFN and got some advice from SCUPA, and we came down to award the contract to Stantec. This is the beginning of drawing down on the federal capital infrastructure dollars. Okay, next slide, please. I know council has decided that we're going to view all the infrastructure with a lens, and to go back to what was earlier discussed, buildings will be based on fire resiliency, striving for net zero, be inclusive, sustainable, and multi-purpose, right? They'll be operated using the village's in-house capacities. That's just another way of saying they'll be designed with the view in mind that they'll be maintained for the long term based on the number of people and the staffing that the village will have. So it won't be overbuilt or whatnot. That's something the village can't handle. Understanding the limited operating cost and the reality that Lytton, as beautiful it is kind of isolated in terms of things. So we don't want to overcomplicate things so things can keep running for the future. As working with the architect, we'll be developing a concept plan that's required for accessing the infrastructure funding. We've already spoken with the farmers market group, just started speaking with folks at the festival space, public washrooms be included with drinking water, also the library, visitor center, museum, pool and park, and a number of multi-use facility rooms. I want to mention too, like we're going to start with the architect as soon as next week. And it's really to provide a visual for folks to get an idea of what is really possible, why kind of capturing some of, the uniqueness of the buildings that Lytton had in the past, pre-fire. But we're focusing on village-owned properties, really ranging from 360 to 420 Fraser Street. Next slide, please. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I'm just going to ask Diane, is that it for the presentations?
Yes, that's it, Mayor O'Connor. And now we can go to questions and answers on these items.
Yeah, so we have Diane, we have Berta, we have Mike and Dawn available to answer questions. And I don't know whether there's been any in the chat, whether people are raising their hand there. Is there anybody in the hall here with a question? Ernie?
Of course, you always say, Diane, now I've kind of misled a few people and businesses about the building permit. I thought that was changed, that it was people before the fire, of course, and I thought it was changed to all property owners before June 30th. That they would get 50% reduction in the building permit.
It's for all properties that are rebuilt that were lost in the June 30th fire. So it's meant to apply to the person that owned the property, is rebuilding that property, and has applied for their building permit by June 30th of 2024.
The archaeology applies to everyone, people that purchase the
Yeah.
property post-fire. So that might be the confusion there.
Building permits are just for those June 30th, 21, is that correct?
Yes, so anyone who lost their building at the fire June 30th and is planning to rebuild can receive the 50% reduction in their building permit fee.
Okay. I have to phone them up and apologize.
Okay.
Okay, one other question. This is for the future. Bought into a new development in Agassiz. It's probably about the size of Lytton. They're building new houses. And when they're mostly done, the icing on the cake is to go around and do all the paving, 2 or 3 inch paving, and made it all brand new. Is there any idea of doing that to Lytton in the future?
So I'll just speak to that. That would be something that we would consider and look at in the future. We have a lot of construction happening and all of those kinds of pieces. So we've actually chatted about that a little bit.
Okay.
But at this point in time, we won't make those specific decisions.
I was just wondering about the money.
Yeah, do you have anything to add to that, Diane? Or anyone else?
No, that's what I was going to respond. So yeah, that's just, we're just not quite there yet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Lisa, is there any in the online?
There, just so you know, there's a little bit in the chat about the Pacific Can Lytton Homeowners Resilient Rebuild Program, just about it being open for applications. And then there was some talk about how people can register for the virtual building info. And there will be a link for the virtual session on March 12th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., not the 17th. That will be available shortly. And there is a question will there be a contact person in the village when residents are building, someone to problem solve on the spot when issues arise?
Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
And I think that there will be a number of different people available in the village over the particularly over this first building season. We have the community navigator, Jeff Eisert, who's just kind of joined us and is getting up to speed on where everything's at. We have Brian Baxter and his team that are here pretty much all day, every day. And although they're not devoted to recovery, I mean, the Village of Lytton staff are all involved and they're all engaged. And if they don't have the answers, they know where to get them. And then we have Mike and Dawn, our recovery managers, that are here frequently and available to assist. You know, when it talks about resolving issues on the spot, you know, the Village of Lytton will have mechanisms in place to solve the issues that are related to the Village of Lytton. I'm not sure, you know, about all issues that, you know, that kind of aren't under our control, but we will do everything we can to help assist and facilitate for sure.
Yes, and can I add that, you know, you talked about these how-to documents. And I think once people see those, once they're out in public, they will also provide some information of who to go talk to, or, you know, depending on the issue and what people are looking for. I think those are going to be valuable.
Yeah, and we're happy to create and provide more of those, as like we see a trend in things that people are wondering about or need information on. You know, we'll continue to add to the group of them for sure.
Question, yeah.
Could I just add that we need to remind people that the office is open every day, and that some of this information is hard copy on the desk, and that Kathy is there to assist people and give direction if they need assistance.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Good. Now, are there any other new questions?
There's nothing left there's nothing else in the chat, but I'll see if there's any raised hands. And yes, just a reminder, you can raise your hand by using the reactions at the bottom of your screen. So if anyone has any questions for any of our staff members, I'm not seeing anything else.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, we will wrap up. This hasn't been a very long meeting, although we've had a lot of good information. Sorry, we do have another question.
It's not a question. I'm just looking at the screen, and so we don't get all the comments sitting here at the table, but I just looked up and I see that, oh, it disappeared. But I do believe that Jane has announced that the homeowners Pacific Can program has been extended to March 2025.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you for noticing that in the chat.
Thank you, Pacific Can, and I hope homeowners can take advantage.
Good. Thank you for that. Yes, good, good. So just to let everyone know that
So
we have a question.
so I was interested in the business recovery program, but I was wondering if it's for new businesses as well, or is it for just business recovery?
Good question.
I mean, I would, if any of our Pacific Can colleagues are on the phone or on the line and would like to jump in, I haven't studied it. I literally just read the press release, so I don't want to make any comments about the criteria and spread confusion. But if there's anybody on the call that knows the criteria and would like to jump in, by all means.
Because I noticed it said it's up to 15 kilometers from town, which would include me. I'm 11 kilometers.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to have more criteria out tomorrow on the program. I just don't really, I just don't want to comment it without knowing for sure.
That's right. Yeah, we've just received it this morning, and so we're just getting it up. Perfect. Good.
Just on the business subject, if we can also make clear whether or not that is only for registered business owners. There was a lot of misinformation in the beginning that it was for everyone, even small businesses, home businesses. And I don't think that's the case. I think you have to have a registered business number. So if we could just make that clear as well, please.
Yeah.
Sure. We'll get that criteria out for sure.
Yeah. But December 7th, when this come out, I had a question, because it wasn't for apartments, but I had a question. Is it for someone that builds an office for someone like the bank? So it's not a direct business, but they're building a building for, say, the bank. There wasn't really an answer to that.
So hopefully that information will be in what's going to be coming out. That's okay. I don't think we have those specific answers at this time. Last chance in the room here or online. Okay.
Mayor O'Connor, Jane has also just put in a link there for Lytton Business Restart Program. So that will be in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So this meeting is recorded, of course, and it's going to be on YouTube. So if anybody is interested in going back and looking at it, they can find it there, along with all of the other meetings that we have, council meetings, other community meetings. And as I mentioned in my opening, I really encourage people to visit the Village website, the Village Facebook page, and the updates, the newsletters. For some of you, if you're interested and you haven't done this, you can actually go on the website and there's a link to have the updates emailed to you. And that's for anyone, not just residents of the Village of Lytton. So if anybody wants to keep updated, it's a great update that's put out every week. And provides a lot of this kind of information as well. So I do want to thank the fellows that came earlier, Lucas and Robin, as well as Diane, Mike, and Dawn, and Berthe for presenting. And also thank Lisa for moderating and running the Zoom for us tonight. As I mentioned earlier, this Zoom is very different from the way that community meetings have been held in the past. We are really trying to focus on meetings that address community. And so our hope, we don't have a date for the next one, but our hope is that the next one We, with the weather being better, people traveling, hopefully we can host it at the hall here in more of a community forum, but also, of course, have the Zoom link as well. And so if any of residents out there or people that would be attending have any input or suggestions on this meeting, please get in touch with us and provide that feedback to us. So again, thank you so much to everyone, and good evening. And I will turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you very much, Mayor O'Connor. So thank you so much for attending today's community meeting, and thank you to the presenters. We appreciate all your questions and your feedback. If you didn't answer any questions, I didn't see any that came up, but if you do have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to the office. And also we have captured your questions in that, and we'll post a Q&A posting on our website as well. So again, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.